Welcome to the Spa Girls podcast. Each week we bring you self-publishing tips, tools, and resources for authors. I'm Shah Barrett.
I'm Cheryl Phipps.
And I'm Trudy J. And this week we have another amazing guest. We have Brenna Aubrey.
Hey, Brenna.
Yay, welcome,
Hi.
Brenna.
Yay.
Hi, thank you for having me.
No
You're
worries
welcome.
at all. We're very excited. So Brenna is going to talk to us about mindset and career sustainability. I think that's what we called it, isn't it? Yes, career sustainability. Longevity is the other word that I like to think of. So before we dip our toes into that topic, I'm just going to read your bio so everyone knows how amazing you are, and we'll go from there. So Brenna Aubrey is a USA Today bestselling author of contemporary romance. Her bestselling romance series, Gaming the System, features smart heroes and heroines connecting over their love of geek culture. When she's not dreaming up people and worlds and writing them down, she's also a mum, a teacher, a wife, an avid reader, a proud geek girl, a self-confessed gaming addict, a French-speaking Francophile, a lover of nature and beautiful sunsets. Welcome. That's very exciting.
Thank you.
So let's start at the very beginning. How did you get into writing and self-publishing? Let's go right back to the start.
I wrote for a long time just for my own enjoyment. It was just this weird thing I did when I first got married. My husband worked graveyard shift and I worked during the day as a teacher. So we were kind of ships passing the night for the first few years because he was also going to school, finishing his college. And so I had a lot of free time at night where I was just kind of felt, it was kind of lonesome. I was on my own alone. So I spent a lot of that time writing fantasy mostly because that was my passion back then, was writing fantasy. Been reading a lot, and I was into tabletop gaming, like Dungeons and Dragons and that type of thing with my group from high school. We were still gaming. And in fact, that's how I met my husband, through that group. It was a kind of a mutual friend, friend of a friend situation. But anyway, so I started writing this big kind of sprawling epic fantasy, and it was just going on and on for pages. I knew nothing about writing. I just had a story and I wanted to see how it ended. So I just kind of would sit down every night and add a few more pages to this story. And I started sharing it around and passing it around to people and my friends online and friends in person. And they'd be like, this is actually pretty good. You should think about getting published. But for me, publishing was this big unknown. I had no idea, getting an agent, all of these things were super overwhelming. I had no idea. And the internet was still pretty new at that point. This was like right around late 90s, I'd say late 90s, early 2000s. And so I started looking around, and I do online critique groups and I keep writing. And then come around 2009 or so, I decided, I really want to pursue this a little more professionally, but I still didn't know how to do it. And I reached out to a local group. They were like a critique group, and they weren't taking anybody new, but the woman who was kind of the contact person suggested I go to an RWA meeting. She said they're great for learning the business, even if you aren't writing romance. It's a great way to start. This was a local chapter meeting of RWA. So this was way back, like 2010. I went. It was very scary for me because at that point I wasn't. But my first meeting was great, and I'm sitting at this table with New York Times bestselling authors and people who are getting honored for their 100th and 150th books. And
Wow.
I'm like, oh, these women are really amazing. So as I started going to these meetings and learning more and more about the business, I started reading their books. And in my teens and early 20s, I'd actually read a lot of romance and loved it before I'd kind of moved on to fantasy. And so I started getting back into reading romance, and that's when I decided to write one. And my first try was a historical romance, and I decided on a historical because I'd been writing this epic fantasy, kind of medieval-based fantasy. Thought, okay, that my voice would probably fit more with historical. So I wrote a Regency, but it wasn't the kind of Regency that were really popular at the time, the Julia Quinn type of rom-com, light, fluffy, happy. This one was more angsty, and it wasn't set in London. It didn't have all the pretty dresses and the glam and all of that. So, but it was good enough actually to get me a literary agent. So I went on, I went on I went on, gosh, what is the word? Totally blank. It's been
Submission.
so long since submission. Thank you.
It's all right.
It's
Yeah, I
been so
know. It's
long
one
since
of
I've been part
those.
of that world, you know. Anyway, I call it pandemic brain, even though we're out of the pandemic now. I think I lost a lot of IQ points over the pandemic. Anyway, yes, I went on submission, and while I was on submission, I had this idea that I'd been playing with for a long time. Actually, my my closest writing friend, we'd met via RWA, and we're still best friends today. We talk almost every day. She's awesome. We both were we started out as really just occasional critique partners, and then the friendship grew and blossomed quite quickly. But she told me, I want to write a virginity auction book. But she wrote historical at the time. And one night I was in the shower and I was thinking about her idea, and I'm like, that'd be really cool as a contemporary romance. I could see that. I could really see that as a contemporary. So I called her up the next day and I said, you should write that idea as a contemporary. And she's like, I'm not writing contemporary, which is kind of funny because she writes contemporary now. But at the time she says, no, I'm not writing contemporary, but you should write it. And so that's kind of where the idea for At Any Price came from. And so I decided to make her a geek girl and center it in gaming culture, because one of the hobbies that my husband and I had done a lot of when we were first married and didn't have a lot of money and didn't have a lot of time except for on the weekends to go out was we were doing a lot of online gaming. We played EverQuest, which is a predecessor to World of Warcraft. We played a lot of EverQuest. And so I knew that culture really well, and I thought that'd be fun. I hadn't really seen many gamer romances out there. I knew they existed, but I'd never read any. So I thought, well, I want to do my take on a romance, but via gaming and kind of just. But I didn't want to make it geek heavy. I wanted it to be a contemporary romance, but with that flavor of geek world, and kind of to normalize it, because I feel like a lot of people thought geeks were weird and different. And of course, this was the era when Big Bang Theory was really popular, so people were more and more exposed to it and liked it. So I kind of was pitching this as, Big Bang Theory meets, contemporary new adult romance, because my heroine was in college. And new adult at that time was taking off hugely. So I was writing this book, and at the same time as I was writing it, I was doing a lot of reading about self-publishing, because up until that point, as you guys know, there was a lot of stigma around self-publishing as, it's what you couldn't do if you weren't good. It's what you did when you weren't good enough for traditional. It's what you did when, you weren't, people who self-published weren't professional about it. They just threw whatever they threw up there. And I'm sure that was true in many cases, but it wasn't always the truth. And authors were finding a new freedom, and new genres were being born out of it, and are still being born out of self-publishing that I think traditional publishers had never even conceived of, for new adult being one of them. A new one that's cropped up since then, literary RPG or lit RPG, which is also kind of adjacent to what I write. So these things that have cropped up, it's kind of broadened the creativity, and so different genres have cropped up out of it, and it was exciting. And so I'm writing this book, and I'm talking about it to my friends, and I mentioned it at a lunch to my agent. We had lunch because she happened to live nearby, and I said, I'm writing this book, I'm almost done, and I'm really excited about it, but I think I'm going to self-publish it. And she says, well, let me read it first. Let me see what, let me read it. She was intrigued enough that she wanted to read it. So she read it. She really liked it. And she asked me if she could talk about it. We were going to the RWA National Conference in Atlanta. And she said, can I talk about it to editors? And I'm like, okay, I'm not decided which way I want to go with it. So yeah, if you want to see what response you get. I wasn't super, excited because I'd gotten like crickets for my historical romance. Um, and so she at the same time she's talking about the book to editors, I'm going to all of these workshops at the conference, and I'm hearing people like Bella Andre, Liliana Hart, all of these really successful early indies that were just so smart and so businesslike and putting out such professional product and doing so in a way that was making them a good living. And Liliana had been a teacher like I was and had just recently quit her job. And even though I wasn't at that time looking to quit my job, it was I'd say, I still loved teaching, but I was excited about, the fact that she, being a teacher, could have success
It
publishing
opens up
as
those
well.
possibilities, right? Sometimes you
It sure does.
Just having options, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I love the freedom of it. I love the idea of being able to pick your own cover artist. And I had a lot of friends in traditional publishing that I'd met through RWA. And I heard their frustrations every day when they got a crappy cover. And instead of, hearing them out, their editor and their agent both would say things like, oh, well, this is why, here's the reasons why you need to like this cover, instead of listening to their complaints or their concerns about the cover. It just felt like I was hearing a lot of frustration on that count. I was hearing a lot. I had a couple friends who had editors who were making them completely rewrite their books, and just weird arbitrary changes like, oh, make him a different profession, or this the heroine ends up with the wrong guy, he needs to end up with this guy instead, that type of thing. And I was like, the more I was reading about the draw of the freedom of self-publishing, the less traditional publishing was appealing to me. So anyway, my agent came to me, sat me down at one of the lunches at RWA, and she's all excited and really animated. And this is at the same time I'm getting really excited about self-publishing. And she's like, I've been talking to editors about your book and they are really excited. They really want to read it. Can you send me the final copy in the next couple weeks? And I flat out told her, well, I don't know, I'm thinking about self-publishing. And she's like, let's just give it a chance. And she's trying to talk me into give it a chance. I'm like, okay. It was a good experience, but it also was a very emotional one because obviously things went really well. And I had to turn down something that was really difficult to turn down. So the long story short is that the book went to auction. Multiple, I think 4 different houses wanted it. 2 went into a bidding war against each other over it. And it was a time where I was, but in my gut, and that's going to be a theme probably for this whole podcast, in my gut, it just didn't feel like the right thing. I was calling up authors who were published with both of those houses and asking them how happy they were. Even authors, I talked to authors who had published with those particular editors who really wanted the book. The editors, were super enthusiastic about the book. They were promising me all kinds of wonderful things. I wanted to believe them, but in some cases I'd learned that even when an editor really, really loves a book and when they are super excited about a book, even they don't have the power to follow through on a lot of the things they want to do about it for it. And one of the things I said is I'd already scheduled this wonderful cover artist, Sarah Hansen, who was well known for doing new adult covers back at the time. There's many, many more talented, many other talented covers that have cropped up since, cover artists. But she seemed to be the premier one at the time. And so I scheduled her, and I was really excited about getting her to do my cover. And so I had talked to the editors who wanted my book. Can we use her? No, they wanted to do it in-house. So there was a lot of things. And there were 3 that came up most prominently. Number one was scheduling. They didn't want to publish for another year. And yet new adult was super big at that time. They didn't they wanted to schedule, they wanted a 3-book deal, but they wanted to publish one every year, whereas I wanted to do a more quick release because I felt like that would be a better way to build a name for myself. And the third one was just the freedom of being able to publish when I wanted, or, you know, some people asked me later on, why didn't you just sign to publish those books and then self-publish on the side? Well, a couple of the deals said I couldn't. They had non-compete clauses that restricted when I could publish and what I could publish and whether I could write in that world or whether, whereas here in my logic said, if I write side stories in that same world, I'm going to be pushing readers towards those traditionally published books. Anyway, the whole decision-making process, everything happened really fast within 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I remember having many conversations with my agent, and I told her at one point when they were about to go into the auction, I said, I don't know whether you're going to choose to let them know this or not, but I want you to know that there is a third bidder in this auction, and that bidder is me.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Smart. Yeah.
That's exactly how I said it too.
Yeah.
And in the end, I decided to go that route, and it was really tough. I talked to some friend authors that I knew that were really well established in self-publishing, and they were very supportive, and they gave me great advice. And
Did you have people saying to you, you should take it?
Yes. Yes. In fact, one of my closest friends who in some ways had acted like a mentor toward me, and some others too, who were like, I had a couple before I even published who said I was really stupid for turning it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that guaranteed money. And I'm like, well, if I do this right, then it's going to be even more. And it ended up, fortunately, being more. And so about a year and 3 months later, I was in a place where I could give my notice at my job. Of course, I had to work until the end of the school year because of my contract, but it was a great it was a great opportunity to be able to segue into a different
very brave, actually. I think
I was going to say that was the earlier days of self-publishing. It was really brave. And also I think there's that sort of pressure from, and I'm not saying it in a mean way, but from writers, because you basically got the dream. You went to auction, like you had publishers fighting over you, to then, I mean, I think it was so smart to say that there was a third person and, third party to the auction. But that's tough. That is a really tough thing to turn down. And I admire
it
that
is tough. And other people have told me that I'm brave. And I feel like maybe I am brave, but maybe also that auction wasn't enough to tell me that I had a book that was marketable.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So it kind of gave me the
That
idea.
self-belief.
Yeah.
That is true.
So
that is
And so it was a little bit of a
but then it worked out, right? So you made
sure
more money from that series. You were able to so you did it. You got the beautiful cover. You got the hype. I remember the when it came out, and that was a big deal. And I read that book and loved it. And
oh, thank you.
Yeah. So where did it go from there? Like, how did that move?
So I decided to blog about it because I thought, some people were writing about leaving traditional deals. At that time, some more established authors, Bella Andre, there was a lot of being written about Bella, who had been traditionally published, and she had taken her books and self-published, and she was to great success. And I thought, nobody's writing about the newbies making the decisions. So I decided, well, here I have this unusual story, and it's an unusual book. So maybe I should kind of, meld those two together. So on release week, I blogged about it, about the whole story, about, the auction and why, and I went through the reasoning why I decided to turn down the traditional contract. And I got a lot of attention, a lot. And back then, everybody was talking about self-publishing because it was it was that breakthrough year, I think. You know, Amanda Hawking had happened a couple years before that, and Hugh Howey had great success. In fact, Hugh was writing a lot about self-publishing back then, and he had reblogged my blog, and he was following my story very closely. So yeah, things kind of mushroomed from that, and plus the book itself was getting a lot of attention aside from the publishing story. So because it was an unusual storyline, and I had sent out a whole lot of art copies. I contacted people via Goodreads and put it out everywhere I could to get reviews and buzz going, like for about a month before the book released. So yeah, so it ended up doing really well, and what my offer, it was a six-figure offer for 3 books. It was 120,000 for the 3 books, but it would have been spread out over the 3 years that the books would have been published, and I ended up making about that much money in the first year. So with the same 3 books.
Oh, same 3 books. Yeah.
Well, I had the one book, and then I published book 1 in beginning of December, and then I published book 2 in May and book 3 in October. But by the time I came back to December, I hit a little bit more than the same amount I was offered. Oh, without the 15% agent fee.
Yeah.
That is a great story. That is just fantastic.
So it's a great story, and it was a great way to launch, but you know, as we'll talk about later, you know, there's a long way to fall.
Yes.
Afterwards too. And that's one thing I've learned about sustainability and longevity is it's a roller coaster. There's ups and downs. So
well, so let's start talking about the sustainability. So at the end of that first year, did you have that in your mind that you wanted a sustainable long-term career, or is that something that you are now looking back on? That, do you know what I mean? Like, that comes from that idea.
You know, I had a couple after that first year, I had a couple more even amazing years, and that was about the time that I decided, okay, maybe it's time to wind down on the teaching. I love teaching and I miss it. But I have some chronic pain issues, some chronic health issues, fibromyalgia being the most prominent that I'd been diagnosed in 2009. And so I was lacking a lot of energy. I was coming home every day really, really depleted energy wise from my job. And I was like, this isn't fair to my own kids. I have no energy to interact with my own kids. And also not fair to my students, really, honestly. So I thought, you know, maybe it's time to shift gears. And, you know, being a full-time writer had been a goal that I looked up to for a long time. So that was another thing that influenced me in making that decision. So yeah, obviously at the same time, my husband had been laid off from his job, and he was kind of acting as my publisher. He actually does all of my he does all of the publishing and all the technical stuff, all the formatting, uploading, audiobook publishing. He interacts with my translators. He's the point manager. I call him my project manager because that was his background before. And so it kind of became a family business, which is a lot of fun. I actually really have loved working with him as my business partner. But the pressure's always been on me because I was the content provider, you know? So, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about is mental health is so important. And when you start to neglect it because you're pushing yourself to do all these other things, it's ultimately it's so counterproductive, and it ended up being for me. My productivity slowed down a lot. I was in the public eye a lot, and as I talked about, I think Trudy was in the mindset group with me where I talked about how I fell under a lot of criticism and online. I'd never been used to any of that. I was so used to just being just my own little group. And I got a lot of attention from my story, and a lot of it, not all, most of it was really positive. People were really wonderful. They were cheering me on, calling me brave. I felt wonderful about all of those things. And then, but there was that small contingent of people who were calling me a liar, saying I was faking numbers, saying I was faking the whole story just to get attention, to sell my book. There was like a lot of that too. And of course, when you're not used to this type of thing, even though you've got 90% of the people telling you all these wonderful things, you're going to listen to that 10%.
Of course, it's human nature. We always put the negative, don't we? Yeah.
Exactly. And so that was my first bit of seeing the tarnish started to wear off there. And there also, there was difficulties with friends. There were some professional jealousies that rose up, which that's one of the things I have on my list for sustainability and mindset, was to kind of flush out the toxic things in your life and not let them fester. And unfortunately, I was still trying to please some toxic people in my life that still felt like they needed their egos. It was just, the sad part is that when push comes to shove, you really find out who your friends are, and sometimes your friends see everything as that they can't celebrate your success because they're too busy nervous about their own failures. And it says more about them, and unfortunately that can, if you're not in the right mindset, you somehow think it's your fault. And you listen to
how
that.
we're raised, right? Like we're kind of raised to look after other people's feelings. Like, oh, don't say that won't hurt their feelings and things like that. But then when you come to try and I don't know, figure out this kind of minefield that you're talking about, you're kind of like, oh, well, it must be my job to kind of make these people around me feel better about my success or something, like by diminishing it or something, and it's like, so how did you figure that out? Did you kind of realize straight away, no, it's not my responsibility to make them feel good?
I wish I could say that was the story. Because things would have ended up so much happier if I'd parted ways with a few of these people earlier. But I'm such a loyal person, and some of these people were close friends, and I wanted so much to be loyal to them because of, I felt like I owed them something, like they'd helped me, so I should help them. And when those people are telling you, well, you deserve all the criticism you got, or because you put yourself out there like that, things like
real
that.
victim blaming.
Instead, they should have been defending you.
So ultimately, things that parting of ways, I made some decisions. I made some difficult decisions myself, and others made decisions, and so ultimately, looking back, it was a hurtful time because I felt rejected. But looking back, I feel like that's some of the best that happened. Some of the best stuff that happened to me was to get rid of those toxic situations, because it was kind of clearing out the dead wood and helping me to reset, to start working on my mindset and focusing on it. And kind of realizing that I'd been clinging too much to things that were bad for me.
And that's actually something that they talk about quite a lot when you, like me, are a total freak about mindset, and is clearing the clutter. Like, and I don't mean to call your friends or these people clutter, but just like making way in your life, because you do hold on to the things that you have, thinking that this, if you let go of it, then it might be a problem, or something bad will happen. But actually, sometimes if you let go of stuff, for me it's like household objects, but if you let go of things, then you can allow more stuff, better, more positive things to come in. And you don't always, it's a really hard thing to do, actually. Like, it is sometimes, it ends up being something that's forced on us, and then we can look back on it like you have, I guess. It was a difficult time. It all happened, that all came to a head during the pandemic. And
it happened at the same, some of this happened at the same time that I actually had COVID. So right at the end of 2020, our whole family caught COVID, kind of ripped through the whole family. Fortunately, we were very lucky. You know, it was a really bad flu, but nothing worse. So we had no, but I happened, because of my fibro, I happened to actually suffer a couple more months of long COVID afterwards. And part of that long COVID was this really, really over the top anxiety. I couldn't sleep. I was having panic attacks daily. And part of this also coincided with a significant friendship ending. So there was that mixed in with it. And
isn't it often the way all these things start piling on? Like it's like suddenly when you're down, it just like keep coming, you know?
Right. It was like a rock bottom. And it's kind of funny because the pandemic started out really well for me. 2020, I kind of felt like we were all in it together. We're all at home, but this is a good time for me to write. But I've got my kids, you know, my kids were still in high school. And I was like, you know, family togetherness. We were having so much family closeness. I was reaching out and talking to my closest friends, and I was getting a lot of energy. I finished up a book that I'd been taking way too long to write, and then wrote another one right after it. And then this happened right at the end of 2020 and the beginning of 21. And so 21 was kind of a rough year for me, and where I was kind of finding my way and trying to reach out and find out how do I build up myself, and how do I build up enough confidence to be able to write a book again? Because there was a point in my life where I felt like I'd forgotten how to write a book. And I was like, I don't even know if I know how to do it anymore, which is crazy. I'd written like, at that point, I'd written a dozen. So it's kind of funny that your brain can tell you these lies, and when you're in a certain mindset, if you're not in the right mindset, you will believe them.
But there's a certain amount of grief involved that you have to take on board and deal with before you can push through. I think, especially when you're talking about friendships ending and you know, health scares, and you know, just the pandemic in general just really you know, mess with so many people's minds. But when you've got them all happening at the same time,
and actually, a lot of writing stuff is in your head, right? Like we are.
It's total head game. I totally agree with that.
So you have
it's completely in your head. And so if things are not right, you know, emotionally or socially or, you know, mentally, it's really, really tough to put yourself in the mind space of being able to go and write about something else. Now I say that with a caveat, because my really close friend, that my critique partner, who's also my co-writer, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, she actually, when she's feeling the most angst and anxiety, she finds a lot of comfort in being able to write. So I envy that. Although I don't I don't necessarily want her to have to feel that way. You know, and she doesn't have to feel that way to write, but that is a way that she deals with her anxiety, is to be able to write and kind of immerse yourself in something different, a different project.
You're not like that, and I'm putting my hand up because I'm exactly the same. I anxiety head, and we've talked about her a lot, and I'm sure you're familiar with Becca Syme. And when I did through the Strengths for Writers, you know, my top strengths require security in order to be creative, and I was feeling very insecure at the time, just kind of physically unsafe as well as mentally unsafe. And it was like, oh, thank goodness, it was like it just opened my eyes to why I wasn't like the people that escaped into their fictional worlds. It just helped so much. So if you're somebody struggling with it, I highly recommend at least looking at Becca's podcasts and YouTube, as well as obviously your courses, but you don't have to do that. Just look into that. It's very liberating. It stops you beating yourself up while you can't be that person.
I do. I love her work, and I love how she gets you to examine how your brain works so that you start to understand for yourself why you do the things you do, or why you work the way you work, or why your process is the way it is.
Yeah.
Because I would so love to be able to write faster, but you know, I've got all these strengths that say, no, you can't write faster. You have to think about it for a while first, you know, and those things.
And I like the way it's called a strength, even. It's kind of like we kind of go, oh, I should be writing faster, I should be doing all these things, when actually, no, my strength is in taking my time and writing this amazing book, and it's just going to take a bit longer.
Agree.
Okay. Like making it okay, right? I think that's what we all mean. So
yeah, I think that's at the ultimate base of her work is self-acceptance, accepting what your strengths are, rejoicing in them, developing them, and stop beating yourself up for the things you wish were your strengths, you know, and that you don't necessarily have.
Yeah.
And I think so many of us think we're broken in some ways, that we're to be fixed, you know. And I mean, I had an entire 300 books of how-to, different books to
Yes.
If I just bought that 301st one, that would have been the one that did it. Side note, I've got down to like this many. But yeah, I think it's particularly, and I, you know, not big on dividing the sexes here, but I think a lot of women particularly are about the fixing part, you know, wanting everybody to be happy and wanting, you know, and often at ourselves as the collateral in that.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I think as women, that's kind of how we're raised, is to we're around to make everybody else happy and take care of everyone else, and we come last. When it should really be the opposite, because if we're taking care of ourselves first, then we're so much better able to take care of everyone else if we're in the right headspace ourselves, you know.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things you did? You said that 2021 was a difficult year, but you've obviously moved out of that difficulty. So what did you do? How did you do that? How did you claw your way out?
Still moving out of it. And I gotta say, before I talk specifics, I do want to say that the one big discovery that I've made in the past 6 to 8 months is that it's a constant journey. It's a constant effort. It's like it requires constant maintenance. At least for me, it's not a destination. It's about where you are every single day. And if you aren't there today, then how are you going to be able to get there tomorrow? And one thing that I've tended to do is, once I've gotten to a good place where I'm starting to feel good, I start to kind of slip on some of my routine things that really helped. And unfortunately, then that brings me crashing down eventually.
Isn't it amazing how we do that? We do. Yeah. I'm kind of in the downwards at the moment, and I'm trying to get myself back up into and it's such a a cycle, I guess. It's kind of like, it's not onwards and upwards. There's kind of like an up and a down, and then an up a bit further. And you have to kind of go, that's fine, that's okay, because as soon as you start beating yourself up and saying whatever, then that sends you further, right? Like,
it's like weather. Like today it's going to be rainy and cold, but you know, the sun will be there showing up tomorrow. So I
feel like singing.
You may be sad and feeling down today, but there's always tomorrow to find the sunshine. It sounds like Annie.
It does.
Little Orphan Annie.
It does. It does, but it works.
Totally get it.
It works, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just kind of my analogy for how it's just using mindset to kind of weather the storm in life and make it so that when things happen, it's a little easier to navigate.
Yeah. So when you say mindset, what are you talking about? Like your affirmations, or just telling, like, how do you deal with that kind of stuff?
Okay, so I made some notes because I didn't want to make, you know, and I wanted to make sure I got these down. And you know, I'm always afterwards, after an interview or whatever, I'm like, oh man, I should have talked about this. I should have talked about that. So the first thing we already talked about was like getting rid of the things that are toxic in your life, whether that's the people or also the thought patterns. when you're in high anxiety, you say the most horrible things to yourself, things that you would never say to your worst enemy. Your inner brain, your inner voice is saying to yourself. And there's this thing that my friend and I say to each other all the time: anxiety lies, depression lies.
So true.
And the problem is you're believing it. So one of the things was to analyze what I was doing, how I was thinking about myself, how I was thinking to myself, that voice I was using, to realize what I was doing. So mindfulness, being mindful of what goes through my head every day, what I was exposing myself to, in the form of that inner voice and in the outside world. I found I really had to curate what I was reading, what I was exposing myself to. Social media for me is something that causes me a lot of anxiety and fear. A lot of it because of how people talked about me in social media back when I started. and plus, and some of it is just, if you look at how people talk to each other on social media, behind the screen of anonymity, they say terrible things to each other. They're really mean.
It often feels like the worst of humanity sometimes on there, some of those comments. Even, you can get like the most innocent, puppy video, and there'll be somebody on there. I'm in a Dahlia group at the moment that has constant moderation posts about polite behavior, and I'm thinking, this is about a beautiful flower. It's a Dahlia group. There is no politics, there is no, and yet people cannot behave themselves in there. Honestly.
Anyway,
sorry, that was my rant for the day about school. It's like you couldn't have anything more innocuous.
Yes. It's so hard. I mean, because I think it's that veil of anonymity and people dehumanizing each other, not realizing that there's a person on the screen, and the whole, if somebody were to make a mistake, the whole dog piling onto anybody who made a mistake or did something that somebody didn't like, and then analyzing when they apologize, was their apology acceptable or not? This whole mindset of, okay, you made a mistake, so now you're dead to me. And I will never forgive you. It's just so absolute in black and white. So those are the things I mean by getting rid of the toxic, limiting what I looked at online, what I exposed myself to, what I was reading, how I was thinking.
Do you use social media for your own promotion, or do you kind of get in and then get out, or how do you actually handle that as an author?
Yeah, I probably don't handle it as well as I should. It's so funny. I barely even duck into my own reader group, and because it was getting to the point where whenever I'd show my face in there, I get all these comments of, when is the next book coming out?
Right.
And back then I was struggling with getting the book
pressure.
out.
Just that pressure,
I couldn't get them an answer. Or why are you working on this book when you should be working on this one? So yes, I realized that, and I had a talk with my assistant. Actually, she would be loving this, because my assistant talked to me last week, and she's like, you need to at least find something comfortable that you can share about yourself, because readers do like to see the person behind the books and the screen. And I'm so shy. Social media scares the heck out of me, and so yes, I need to come to terms with that totally.
Maybe not though. I think I really don't think you do. I think it's just comfortable for you. And you know what? If it means that your assistant is the one that's doing all the posting, then protect yourself first.
It's true. It's true. Unfortunately, my husband gets a lot of the website email too, so he screens a lot of that out for me too. So if there's anything he doesn't think I should see, then he just holds on to it and doesn't say anything to me, and forwards me the good stuff. But sometimes the good stuff can also add a little, you're getting all this praise, that sometimes can also put you pressure on you.
Of course, it's a double-edged sword. Like it's nice, but absolutely, and then if you in some circles were to say that out loud, then you'll get a lot of criticism from other authors who are like, oh,
Yes.
you know, oh, to be, you know, have that
Yeah.
problem kind of
Yeah,
thing.
you're
Right,
not
right.
And they
grateful.
say it without necessarily
Yes.
meaning, it's more of
Yeah.
a reflection of their own thinking, but they don't realize the impact of those words has on you to receive
Yes,
that.
yes. Right,
So that's
right.
where
And
the,
it's like,
I was going to say,
I'm
that's where the
sorry.
mindset work comes in again, though, doesn't it? Like, where you have to go to
Yes.
yourself. The pressure is only in my own head, and I don't need to listen to the other author. You know, there's that, and
Right.
it's actually hard. It's not an easy thing to do.
It's hard
but
work, man. It's a full-time job to manage our brains. Like, I don't know how we get
It
anything else
is.
done. Like,
Yeah.
some days I'm like, what did I do today? Okay, I maybe did the dishes. Like, sometimes it's, you just got to go with it.
You know, I gotta say, you just said something there. It was just real gold for me. Is that the whole mindset work is managing your brain management.
Yeah.
I totally get it. It is a full-time job. It's
Yeah.
something you have to work at constantly.
Yeah.
It's worth it in the end when it's working and it's doing, you know, the good it is. It's so worth it, but it is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so aside from doing those things, curating and filtering out the toxins, some other things I started doing was meditation. I would just do a short 10-minute guided something.
Did you
just
do
with
an
some
app?
breathing,
Did you use an
relaxing.
app, or did you use like an online
I
YouTube
used
one?
YouTube has some great ones.
Yeah.
And I was also using the Headspace app
Yes.
because
Yeah.
that came with
Like
my
yeah.
health insurance.
Yeah.
They gave us a subscription to that, and Headspace is great.
Yeah.
Also was doing some EFT. I don't know if you know what that is, the tapping.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic.
And that's got a great
changed
app.
my life, just saying.
Oh my gosh. It is great. And there's some great meditations on that one as well.
Yeah.
And they also had those active transformational ones, which are ones that you can listen to while you're walking the dogs or doing, you know, folding laundry or whatever. So don't have to sit there and breathe. You can actually be listening to them while you're doing something else. Well, I guess it's a little bit like a podcast. And then they have those little inspirational 5-minute kind of pep talks that really, really help too. And so there's lots of great stuff on YouTube, uplifting, mindset, mental health. I love Therapy in a Nutshell channel on YouTube. She's great. She talks a lot about anxiety and depression and the voice we use when we talk to ourselves and those type of things. So a lot of learning about why I was thinking the way that I was thinking about myself and about my work. One thing that also really helped is gratitude. And Renee Rose encouraged the morning journaling, where you just write about whatever, and you even if you're just asking, you know, in a way you're asking the universe, what does the universe want me to know today, you know, or what is on my mind today, or what are my concerns, anything, just using those pages to dump those thoughts down. Even if I never look at them again, it helps.
It's like a little bit like clearing out some of the clutter in your head, you know. That you don't need to,
that continuing to declutter, right? Right. One thing that also has always helped me and has really been inspirational to me is getting out in nature, just going for a walk, going out and being in the sunshine, even spending time in the yard, the fresh air helps a lot, because you know, our job is a very solitary job, and there are days where I don't leave the house. Like I'll go like my husband he goes and does the shopping. He'll, you know, we'll sit down and do a list, but he goes out and hits the store, and other than walking the dogs, I may never leave the house for like a week. And I realize if I don't actually make the effort, I'm not going to. So I mean, there's something about getting dressed up and going somewhere, even if it's just to go kill an hour, or even just to go for a drive or a nice walk in the park, or to meet your friend at the coffee shop, or even to just go work at the coffee shop yourself.
Exactly.
Just be surrounded by people.
That's it. Yeah, I think, and that's what also that pandemic was so difficult for us, because we realized how much all of us, even those of us that are introverts, actually miss that connection with people. Just, you know, I became besties with the ladies that worked at the supermarket, local supermarket, because we were locked down for a long time, and that was the only people I could see. I mean, Zoom's great, and these guys kept me relatively sane, but it was actually, you know, it's
human contact.
You need that human contact. We do, even if we're
We
introverts.
do.
Even from a distance and behind masks.
Yeah, behind a plastic shield as you're buying your loaf of bread for that day.
It was such a weird time, wasn't it?
It was a really weird time. And side note, I don't think we figured out actually how weird it was. You know, I think it's going to need another 10 years on our knowledge.
And we don't know how it's affected us either. I still go into the supermarket and there for a few seconds as I first walk in, I feel like I'm doing something wrong or I'm missing something, and it's because I haven't got my mask on. And we haven't worn masks for a long time now. I should be totally over that, but I'm not quite. So I reckon that's going to be something that we'll see. I mean, and if you're writers with anxiety or you know, I can imagine that it might be something that we have to keep an eye out for.
Just hearing somebody cough behind you, it's like
I'm still not comfortable going to the movie theater. I mean, I've maybe seen 2 or 3 movies since the movie theaters opened up, and even then it's been reluctant.
The last one I saw was that modern version of Emma with Anna Taylor-Joy, I think. Yeah, that was, and I remember sitting there, and it was myself and 6 other people in the movie theater, and I'm like, what do they know that I don't know? And it was like the next week things hit. And that was the last time I went. Having said that, I've traveled since, so you know, I've been on a aluminium tube in the air with people, so you know, that's way worse, I would imagine, than the theater. But but all these things add up, and it's just, I think we need to give ourselves credit for actually getting through that period as well, as best we could, you know, and creating on top of that. That was just another layer of
still producing, still being an author, still, you know, doing what we love, despite not always feeling like it.
And sometimes getting innovative about it, which I thought was kind of cool. We started these Zoom offices, which I actually participated in, and met some new author friends that way, people I'd never even known before. And we'd all log into a Zoom meeting and be writing on camera for hours at end, and we'd chat once in a while. And but what a clever way to get around the whole isolation angle of it. And I'm like, you know, I hope things like that continue. And you know, we're about a year, I guess we're about a year out of this now, and but it's still lingering a little bit. But these are little things that I hope we've learned out of this, because even before the pandemic, we as writers, as stay-at-home writers, full-time writers, we tend to just isolate ourselves. It's not always good.
In some ways, I also think people that usually weren't work from home people got a taste of it and realized actually how lonely and isolating it can be. And I think my hope is that it will also give an appreciation for the challenges. It's not all, you know, cutesy, sit in your jammies, eating chocolates and, you know, just pumping out the words kind of thing. You know, I had friends that the word anxiety wasn't even in their vocab, and yet they really, really struggled, and I take no joy in saying that. And it was that isolation aspect particularly for them, and it just gave them more of an understanding. And so when I talk about my own anxiety, I just let it all hang out, because actually, you know, it's touched more people. They have had, I think, a taste of what that isolation and that brain, and you know, thinking this is how we're going to be living now, stuck in our houses, you know, that sort of That's my hope anyway, that it makes us a little bit more understanding. Not that social media would agree with that, but I like to live in my world. It is people having more of an understanding.
Yes, the more empathy. I think that's one
Yeah.
thing that really our online interactions have lacked, and that we could that those type of interactions we could use is more empathy.
Yeah.
So
with
what
other
else
people.
what else did you do in terms of mindset, or because I think we should move on to a little bit of career longevity kind of
Yes,
stuff.
sustainability. I think
What
that's,
you have to
Yeah.
say around those aspects of that. So
Yeah, so I pretty much got through my whole list about the mindset, except for to stay connected with the people who are your support system, and try not to shut them out even when you're feeling really low. Those are the times that you really need to be connected and not closing yourself off, even though that's our number one tendency, to just kind of do the turtle shell.
Yeah.
That's just going to make it worse. I find isolating yourself even more will make it, so you go off and lick your wounds or whatever, is it makes it worse. It kind of exacerbates the problem.
I think you're looking
And
at it from
so
self-protection, but actually
yes,
it's a spiral down, I think, from there.
yes. And we all have people in our lives that love us, our family members, we have close friends, our good friends, the non-toxic ones, and we should be reaching out to them and saying, hey, I'm going through this. Do you have any words of wisdom for me, or can you just listen for a few minutes, or that type of thing. It makes a huge difference. And even if they're over a distance, then we have all these great technologies that like Zoom and Google Meet and all of that have kind of arose and gotten really popular up over the pandemic. Another great result.
Yeah, exactly.
silver lining.
Okay, so on to sustainability,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I have some thoughts about that too. So coming out of this, one of the things that I felt like I was really kind of shaken up in my confidence, and I didn't know which direction to go in. And some things were happening over the same time. In 2021, Kindle Vella launched. I don't know how familiar you are with that.
We can't
new
access
platform.
it outside in New Zealand, from New Zealand at this
That's
point.
right.
But
That's
We know
right.
of it.
yeah, we're aware.
Yeah.
Yes. Unfortunately, and I have talked to the Kindle Vella reps about that. They are not promising anything. You know how tight-lipped Amazon is. But they are aware that because I've told them I have lots of friends outside of the US that want to be able to publish and write on and Vella. But the one thing that was really cool about Vella is my friend and I we had a book that we had written like way back in 2014, and we're like, we should just launch this book on Vella. So we went back and we rewrote it as a serial, but it taught us kind of the whole concept of serializing and how serializing works. And we so my next thing in sustainability is, if you're feeling at a point in your career where you're either doubting or you don't know which direction to go in, one of the things you can do is try something new. And so that's one of the things we did. Was I tried the co-writing thing, which we'd never really done. So we've been co-writing. We have 4 books now that we have put up, either on Vella or in KU under a different pen name. We tried a new genre. I actually volunteered for a charity anthology in the wake of Roe versus Wade getting overturned. I felt really strongly about supporting the cause of women's reproductive rights. So I volunteered to write a novella for that, and it tied in with the books that I'd been working on. So that was really cool. It's kind of like a prequel novella about that couple. And it was nice. It was a nice little breath of fresh air, because it's always a challenge, when you have a word count limit, and this one was 10K, and to get a whole story told in 10K, it was
tricky.
Yeah. So just the whole puzzle pieces of fitting all that together, and how can I do that in the least amount of words possible, especially since I'm pretty wordy. and my books are pretty fat normally. So shaving it all down and figuring out how to do something new like that. So those were my ideas: new genre, co-writing with a friend, learning how to serialize, a new platform, for example, going into KU when you're wide, or vice versa. So doing something new. Another thing I've always wanted to do is write more diversely than I had been, and writing own voices heroines. So I'm half Middle Eastern, and I've never written about a Middle Eastern heroine, and I'd like to do that. So that's one of the things I've been working on lately. So it's been really exciting for me.
Nice.
I also have a hero who's got family from New Zealand.
Oh,
So,
there you go.
Yeah.
So you need to come down for a trip, Brenna.
Yes, exactly. Research. I'm actually going to your part of the world next week for Rare in
Oh,
Melbourne.
brilliant.
Oh,
Oh, that's right. Of
Yeah,
course, you're
yeah,
going
I'm
to
so
Melbourne.
excited.
Wendy's going to
Yes.
be there. Our other
We've got a
podcast.
number of friends there. Nalini and
Oh,
Wendy
that's
will
so
be there.
cool.
So yeah, we'll need to connect you guys together.
Yes, that's so cool. It's so cool. I'm really excited. I've never been to your part of the woods, and it's going to be a really short trip because my husband can't go, and I told my husband I can't explore without you. I can't go to
Yeah.
that cool place without you. So the next time we go,
It'll give you
we're
a
going
little
to go see New
taste.
Zealand for
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
and Australia.
Yeah.
Yes, it will give me a little
Lovely.
taste. And I'm super excited to meet Australian readers. They seem so excited and so cool. And I think it's a big part of it is they don't get
No.
to see
Yeah.
American
It
authors
is
very often.
very,
Oh,
it's
a
a
long way to go.
different, we just don't have the reader events, we don't have the author events. So it
Yeah.
is a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that Rare has a lot of the local authors as well. You know, and make these big, wonderful events because that allows authors to meet each other, which is really
Absolutely.
awesome.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the other thing I'm doing is I'm not sure how familiar you are with Zoe York. I think you have interviewed her,
Yeah.
Yes, a
haven't
couple
you?
of times actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's so brilliant.
She is.
And
She is.
I'm reading her Romance Your Brand. I think that's
Yes.
the first one.
Yes. We did a podcast
Where she
with her
talks
about
about series 2.0.
Mm.
And so right now I'm in development for my series 2.0. I'm taking my Gaming the System series, which has become my backbone series that my readers have really gravitated to and loved, and I'm going to level it up to use gamer language.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So what are
Love
some
it.
of the things you're doing to level that one up? And this is a part of longevity, right? So you have a series, it's done
Yes.
well for you in a certain packaging, in a certain way, and now
Mhm,
you're making changes to kind of extend the life of it. Was that a fair way to say it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm working on the very last, officially the last book for my Gaming the System series. Now, Gaming the System series is kind of a unusual creation because it has it starts out with a trilogy focusing on the same couple. The first 3 books in the series are the same couple, and they're kind of their whole arc. It's pretty angsty and epic. And then books 4 and 5 go to their friends. So there's 2 different couples. Those are standalones. And then book 6, it goes back to the first couple. It's their wedding book, but it's not just a novella. It's a big complete story. And then I have books 6 and 7, which are standalones again. And then 8, I'm sorry, 6, 7, and 8. Yeah. And then 9, I bring back all of the couples and kind of write like a kind of a Love Actually style holiday romance where they're all in a cabin together and each couple gets their own storyline. And so it's a little bit like a collected extended epilogue for all of the, and so you could check in with all the couples and how are they doing. So
That
one
sounds
of the
like a difficult book to write. I'm
Yeah.
just point that out right now.
You know, it's funny, that was my fastest one ever to write because
Wow.
I treated them like 4 different short stories and I gave myself 10K, 5 different short stories, and I gave myself 10K on each story. And so I came up with a cute little story for each of them that they were, you know, some little thing that they were struggling with. Like one was the hero was trying to find the most creative, flamboyant way to propose to the heroine. because they weren't engaged yet. They were together at the end of the book. It was happily for now, but they weren't engaged. And he wanted to finally ask her to marry him, and because he thought that's what she wanted. And at the end, he realized, she realizes that's why he's doing it, and he's put all this pressure on himself to make this the most flamboyant, proposal. At every turn, it backfires. So something, everything goes wrong. Like he takes her on this. They're up at a ski location. It's New Year's Eve, and they're at a glamorous ski resort, and they're on this. What do you call those?
Gondola.
I'm losing my words today. Yes, gondola. They're on a ski gondola, and they had, he has it all set up with the concierge set up with a dining table, and they're going to have this beautiful dinner in this gondola as it goes over the valley, and she gets sick. She gets motion sickness. So she's,
Oh, no.
sick everywhere. So he never gets proposed to her. So it's little stories like that that were just kind of a lot of fun to write.
Okay.
But yeah, I just tried to keep them really, really simple. That's why I think they were fast to write, and I just treated them like their own little stories. And then I kind of just interspersed the chapters after the fact. And when I did my revision, I made it so that they would segue easily. It wouldn't be too confusing, because I had 9 different points of view.
Oh my
in that
goodness.
book. I've never done anything like that before. It's crazy.
Wow.
It was a lot of fun.
So is that the last book in the series? Is that the last one?
That so far is the last book. I am writing what's going to be considered the last book now. It's the original couple. They're going to have a baby. This is important because of their journey in the trilogy. They actually have a loss, and so my readers really, really, really want to see them start a family, because they have a really, really tragic loss. And I don't want to be too spoilery if anybody wants to read those, but anybody listening. But anyways, my readers are expecting this last book, so I'm writing this last book, and I'm also using it as a way to kind of introduce where I'm going. Because I've, up until this point, I've been dragging my feet. I've written so much about this couple. You know how it is. You want to move on to something new. I love this couple. They're so comfortable to write about, and my readers really want more, but I'm just like, my brain doesn't want to go there. But now I've seen this as an opportunity of, here's my way to kind of on ramp them to something new. And so my new thing is I'm changing, I'm going to change the setting. So this is going to be like a small town setting. I find those are very comforting. I love them myself. So I'm going to kind of segue into something rather than, LA suburbs, Southern California, which is where I mostly set my books in California. This is also going to be in California too, but it's going to be a much different type of setting. And so I'm just kind of taking those aspects that Zoe talks about, like where you focus on the things that your readers really love, and you level them up.
Yeah.
Nice. That's such good advice. Like, just think about that for a second. And it makes, like,
yes, it's great advice.
Yeah.
She's brilliant.
Yes, she is. I really like her. I like her brain a lot. How I think she's very analytical, but yeah.
And she's very approachable. I like how she can. A lot of people can figure things out, but they cannot explain to you why they work. Zoe's really good at being able to explain to you.
Yeah.
If she figures it out, and then she makes it approachable and accessible
very
to you.
True.
Yeah.
And can I just say, what a wealth of I don't think it's any accident that so many of the leaders in self-publishing and of the really at the forefront and also the pioneers, but also now the continuing developers of self-publishing are from the romance world, women writing romance. It's a wonderful. It always gives me the good feeling about that.
Isn't it? It's a great girl power moment, because
really is.
I see online. I see these discussions. Because I am slowly co-writing a lit RPG with my husband.
Oh,
under a
cool.
different pen name. Yeah, that's another one of those try something new
Mm.
moments.
I actually wrote down
so,
lit. I wrote down lit RPG question mark about you earlier because I actually thought she'd be really good in lit RPG. So there you go.
And we're slowly serializing it on Kindle Vella, and then it'll eventually become a novel. And it's a lot of fun, but I see a lot of the forums and the discussion groups among the authors in those different, sci-fi and those different genres, fantasy. And a lot of them talk about how the romance authors really have it all figured out. And
Yeah.
I'm like, yes.
I know, finally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Finally, we get some respect.
We haven't
right?
just got the cooties. Yeah, not looking at any particular
exactly.
conferences, and no, let's not go down there. Anyway, keep it positive.
Focus on the topic.
Yes.
I've got a question. You talked about just changing between or thinking about changing your platforms, going from wide for Kindle Unlimited. Can you just talk a little bit about how you did that?
Sure.
So I've been thinking about it for a while. I've always been wide. I've been always a very strong believer in wide. But the more and more I started looking into Kindle Unlimited, I began to realize that it's a completely different audience. It's not so much one versus the other as in, but it's a different platform. And it's hard to make that decision because establishing those relationships with the other stores, the other platforms is difficult, and you don't want to offend people. And that was but I got to the point where I started to realize that one of the only things that was keeping me into trying Kindle Limited was I was too afraid to offend some of the reps from the other platforms. And I was like, this is a business decision. It's not personal. And I have books that I think fit KU really well. They're long. I write long. My last full novel was 140K. That wasn't the Christmas one I was talking about, but the one before that, that was a little too long. I don't ever want to do that again. But it ended up. I was happy with the end result in the end, but I don't know if I really want to go there again. But I feel like the KU audience will respond well to them, so I'm very hopeful for that. However, KU has grown by leaps and bounds. It just something that was just starting when I first launched my KU launched in my 2014, I believe, and that was just as I was launching my series. And so it's in the last almost decade that it's been out. Obviously, it's an entity of its own. So learning how to market in KU is so much different than marketing to a wide audience. And so I'm still learning. So that's another thing. One wonderful thing is that I'm a #1 learner in the Clifton strengths. So I like learning new things.
Yeah.
Are you a learner too?
I am. It's definitely in the top. It's one of my top 5. It's all not so much in the executing. I'm all about the thinking.
Yes. All my thinker strengths.
#1 intellection. Yeah, my learner's #3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Are you a slow writer too?
Oh, glacial.
Oh, I hear you, sister.
So how are you approaching your marketing for your KU as opposed to your wide?
That's a great question. So obviously I have to change the focus of my ads. I am learning how differently ads behave, especially Amazon ads.
Interesting.
With your KU books, there's a whole different dynamic there. With Facebook, not so much. It's about the same, in my opinion. The targeting is a little different, but in general, Facebook ads are about the same. I'm trying to figure out whether getting a BookBub is tougher or not with a KU book, because they rejected a book that they have never rejected before. But that was before I put it in KU. And one of the things I did do that was actually quite time consuming, but totally worth it. When I launched, before launching into KU, was I recovered all the books. I rethemed them because my branding was kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
At one point, I decided I wanted this a single couple to represent those books that were that focused on that couple that I was talking about before. And so I'd gotten a photo shoot and I'd gotten a whole redesign on those books. And I thought, okay, well, I'll have the but there's different branding on the standalones. And I thought, well, maybe that will be good because that will have them stand out, even though they're all on the same series page. People will be able to look at the books and see which ones belong to this couple and which ones are, standalones. But it kind of made my branding look a little cluttered. So I like this new direction. It's actually something I'd been struggling with for a while. I didn't know where I wanted to go with I knew I needed new covers. I needed to update, but I didn't know. I was like kind of stuck in indecision, and out of the blue, it was actually rather kind of her. I reached out to her because I was going up. I have family in Seattle, and she lives nearby. And I reached out to Penny Reed and said, "Do you want to get together for coffee sometime?" And she replied back and said, "Oh yeah, I'd love to. And oh, by the way," and it was the cutest thing. She had we'd been in an anthology together earlier in the year, and I think she had been on my page to recommend my books for the anthology or something. We'd done a box set together, and she noticed that I was using the original covers, and she got this idea. So she says, "I had this idea and I was just playing around with it." And she's so talented. She just knows branding so well. And so she sent me these mock-ups, and I really liked the idea. They were neon on black. And so I took those. She just had done a couple of the covers, and I took those and I sent them to a cover designer that I really had worked with before, who was really talented. And I said, "Can we make something like this?" And I kind of, gave her some of the directions, what colors I wanted, and what I wanted streamlined, and but based on Penny's ideas. So it was really, really sweet and generous of her to do that. And I just fell in love with those ideas. So I just kind of took that and ran with it. But it took us about 2 months, the designer and I, mostly because I think she has a day job as well. She had a lot of things going on in her life too.
They look really good though.
Yeah.
Thank you. But it was a lot of covers.
Yeah.
So, it's, first of all, it's a significant investment as well, but it was totally worth it. And all that, and also a time investment because we were going back and forth daily. What about this one? What about the, going and searching for those drawings and everything. That was, it was
and
fun.
then you've got all the reformatting, the whole, the print books, the whole shebang.
Yes,
it's a big deal.
And that was my husband, who I affectionately call the publisher. He had to redo all the, we had to rewrite all the back matter and update it, make it more conforming to KU, changing the links in the back matter. And I actually really streamlined the back matter. I use a very spare bullet list now because I feel like back matter was getting kind of bloated. At some point, it's very chatty, and I think people just want the basics. They want to know, okay, where can I get the next book? Is the next book available? Where can I get it? Is there a preview? Can I look at it? Is it in the book? And she's a cool author. I think I might want to be on her newsletter. And so those are the things that kind of boil it down to. And I don't even bother with, follow my Facebook page, follow me on Instagram.
I think that's a good message in there, because I think we do. We keep writing, writing a letter to the people, but sometimes we don't need to.
Right. I think especially with back matter, less is more. And if you're mixing, if you're putting a lot of calls to action back there, it's going to kind of give the reader overwhelm. So streamlining it.
Do you give a snippet of the next book in the series, or just the link to the next one?
I do at the very end, after so at the very end of the book, I have the link to buy the next book, and so the message says, click here to buy the next book in the series, or read on in this book, you know, for a sample chapter.
Right.
And it's usually chapter 1 or chapter 1 or chapter 1 and 2, depending. If it's a dual POV book, I will usually put the first 2, because that gives them both POVs to read.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
Well, I think
I feel like we can keep chatting for another hour or so, Brenna, but we've reached the end of our time. But so just quickly, is there one golden nugget piece of advice that you would give to someone who's trying to ensure that they've got career longevity or sustainability? Like, what's your...
I think it's all about believing in yourself, believe in, and after you've been through this for a while and you've gone through some of the hard knocks, just going back and remembering what it was, that spark, that joy that you felt in writing your first few works. You know, there's nothing like that feeling, and you can bring it back again. It doesn't all have to feel like, like a drudgery or a job or whatever. There are, just to remember what it was about those first stories that made you so happy to write them, and that you can bring it back again with the right mindset. If you're, you got to work at it. It's not going to come back like that, but it will.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's awesome.
And I think for everybody, it's going to be different. I'm sorry. I could keep talking for another hour too.
No.
I think it's going to be whatever that spark is, and however you're going to bring it back, it's going to be different for everybody. But I think with a little thinking and a little introspection, I think everyone has the tools to figure it out.
Yeah, 100%. That's lovely. Thank you so much for spending time
thanks
with
for
us
having
today.
me.
Spa.
You ladies are awesome. Thanks for doing this.
So are you. So
I've gotten so much out of your podcast in the past, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, that's very
so
kind.
grateful.
Oh, thank you.
It's always nice
so much. So where is the best place to find you if someone wants to go and look up your books or find more about you?
My website, I say that with a warning of I need to update it. But yeah, my website's probably the best place. Or that's probably the best place. But or my Instagram.
Okay, so that's
those are
BrennaAubrey.com.
That's the social media. Yes, BrennaAubrey.com or BrennaAubrey.net. They both work.
Okay, awesome. That's right. And your Instagram too. Okay, cool. You can go look you up on Insta. And where's the best place to find us, Shah?
So we're on Instagram as well. It's Spa Girls Podcast as a YouTube, and spargirlspodcast.com is where you'll find all our previous episodes, also on your podcast app. But a lot of what Brenna's mentioned in the podcast today, we've actually got, well, I'll put the links in the show notes, links to Zoe York episodes, links to Becca Symes, so it's just a great conversation, and thank you so much, Brenna. We're also on patreon.com. It's Spa Girls Podcast if you'd like to join us in our Superstars, self-publishing Superstars group.
Yes, awesome. Thank you, Shah.
Awesome.
And thank you all for listening to another episode of the Spa Girls Podcast. We've enjoyed having you here with us, and we'll be back again next week. But for now, farewell.
Keep
Bye.
well.
Bye.
Bye.